There are some people that just want to put their heads down and focus on the work, but they don't realize there's a price to that. It's not as simple as do you want this job or not. It's more of a what is important to you and where is this friction. We all kind of grew up in different work environments. So thinking about the context piece also gives you a little bit of color when you're thinking about working across teams. But those are the three that I always return back to.
That's really good.
You have to show up at work as the person who you want to become. So if you want to continue to grow in your career, show up as the person who is worthy of that.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today we have Ashley Rudolph. She hasn't just climbed the corporate ladder, the leadership ladder. She's rebuilt it from leading high growth tech startups to coaching executives in critical career moments. Ashley brings powerful blend of operational experience and executive clarity to the conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Ashley.
Hi. And my dog had to say hello too, I guess.
Hey, all good.
That's the world that we live in now. But I'm excited to be here today.
Absolutely, Ashley. Thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about your journey up to this point. How did you go from, being in leadership roles at tech startups to the coaching realm? Let's start there.
Yeah. So I want to start by saying that some of the best people that I've met, and I feel like you fit in this bucket too, Avetis, they have very circuitous paths to where they get, and I had that too. So in the beginning of my career, I was actually a marketer, and I kind of played around in the media buying space at agencies and played around with digital marketing and social media. And where I really kind of fell in love with work and the work that I was doing was when I jumped into tech. And that's kind of where my career exploded. I went from being an individual contributor to a vice president in 5 years, which was not easy. It took a lot of dedication, and I worked really hard to get there. But so I'm an operator. I care about making people better at their jobs. That's the way that I led my teams, and that's how I got to where I was continually looking for the places where my teams could optimize, where we could find efficiencies for the business, and then running with those things.
Amazing.
So after 10 years in tech, running the operations on the business side and on the product and technology side, I decided to take all the learnings that I had as a vice president, as an executive leader, and dedicate my time to coaching. And I'm coaching in an area where I flew, where I excelled. And what I really spend my time on is helping people who are high achievers, who are like me, kind of make that switch from being buried in execution to being more strategic.
Yes.
I know you probably feel this as an executive, as a leader, as a founder yourself, where the most frequent piece of advice you probably give to your teams is stop focusing so much on execution, like pull yourself out of the weeds and be more strategic.
Yes.
So that's exactly what I spend every single day doing with the executives and the leaders that I coach.
Let's talk a little bit about that, what you just described, which is be more strategic. What does that mean? What does that look like? Because you're right. It's something we hear, we read about, we tell our team members. I have some managers here that I have to sometimes pull out of the weeds. I have to pull myself out of the weeds. But what does that actually look like?
Yeah, me too. So I'll tell a quick story because this was exactly what a coaching meeting was like last week. I ended my week doing this with someone. And she's someone who basically fits the profile of a quick climber, and she needed to make that shift from getting sucked into the day-to-day of her projects and being a hands-on executor to thinking 2 years from now, where do I want to be? And I'll just pause there and say that really strategy is being able to look at the long view and then say, okay, well, if 2 years from now I want to land 3 big deals, let's just say that's what it is, and being able to backwards map that to your day-to-day. So it's, oh, wow, I guess I shouldn't be spending all of my time in these production meetings because I'm actually not having the sales conversations or the creative conversations that I need to have that will land me those 3 deals long term, or at least the first one. So it's really just about having that long-term vision and then taking the steps that you need to take in your day-to-day to get there.
That's great. That's really clean. So it's just stepping back and kind of mapping out. You start with the end in mind, and then you back it up to see what you would need to know. That's great.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Actually, you mentioned something earlier, that not enough people are actively talking about working hard in their roles.
Yeah.
It's almost like taboo to talk about working hard for your employer. It's like you. And I think the young people have really misunderstood what the message that's being sent out there, which is like, look, employers need to treat their people well. They need to give them room to breathe. They need to leave them alone on their vacations. They need to leave them alone on their weekends. But the employee themselves has to work hard to get somewhere. There's a lot of misunderstandings there, and a lot of folks want to grow, but they really don't want to do anything to get there.
Yeah.
They just talk about it, and I want to grow, and I'm leaving my job because I can't grow. And the question we ask when we're interviewing people, whether it's for our clients or for ourselves, is like, well, what did you do to grow? Did you have these conversations with your managers? So let's talk a little bit about that. Why were you willing to work so hard, and what did that look like, and what did it lead to?
Yeah. So the one reason, or the initial reason why I was drawn to working hard was I was hired to be a program manager for a Ruby on Rails backend web development program and a data science program. I was a marketer. I had absolutely no technical experience, but what I had was leadership experience, and what I had was I came from the education industry, and those were 2 things that at the time my employer was General Assembly. What they were looking for was someone to bring that seniority, management, and education background to the role. But I knew that I was adding value to the company given the experience that I had, but I was not comfortable putting myself out there without developing any level of subject matter expertise. So what that looked like for me was, it wasn't a 9 to 5. In order for me to learn those skills, that meant that I came in on Saturdays and Sundays because those were when they were hosting workshops. And I did it. And no one told me that I had to do it.
Yes.
They told me it was a nice to have, but I was the one who was going to be having conversations with data scientists and with web developers, and I was the one who was going to have to convince them to work for General Assembly. And I could not have those conversations without having some level of technical fluency, or I could have tried, but I would have had a harder time doing the job.
Of course, you wouldn't have had the credibility.
Exactly. It was about credibility for me. And it was even some strategic foresight of being like, oh, this workshop instructor is teaching on the weekends. Did they know that they could teach during the week and do a part-time program and not a one-off workshop? Let me take their course and start a conversation and maybe pull them into the part-time side, right? So there were layers to it, but I would have to say that the thing that was driving me and what I try to help my clients do to help their team members connect to the work in a similar way is, okay, what are the core motivators there? What are the things that may be driving this person to want to work hard? That may look different than what my motivations were. Someone could have been fine with being like, okay, well, here's the playbook. I'm just going to interview people. It doesn't matter if I have the expertise. That just wasn't me.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
So you took it upon yourself to bridge a gap you felt you had.
Yeah. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
And that's terrific, because again, as an employer, sometimes when you have a high riser, someone well, forget that for a minute. When you have credible employees that are doing well, that you have to sometimes put them in situations they don't know about, right?
Yeah.
So it might be an operations person, you need them to step into HR, or it's a operations person that you won't need them to step into a marketing realm. But your fear is they don't have expertise.
Yeah.
So this won't work.
Yeah.
Even though I love this person's work ethics, whatever. The fear is that they just won't ramp up fast enough. So what do? You go and bring in people outside, and then those people get frustrated and leave. But if I see that person will do whatever it takes to ramp up and learn something new, then it's really easy for me to trust, no, I don't need to bring in an outsider, because yes, the outsider might have marketing experience that my operations person doesn't have, but my operations person is going to find a way to learn this marketing piece, and they have domain expertise. So why don't I trust him or her with it versus going out and getting an external person? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And I've seen two traits that indicate whether or not someone's capable of doing that. So someone who enjoys a challenge or rises to the occasion, they just like to be challenged by their work. That's someone who might be able to step up to that task. And they also need to be adaptable. And that's the thing that is sometimes a make or break, specifically in tech, is like, yeah, someone could love a challenge, but are they also the person who's going to be okay with the product roadmap shifting mid-cycle?
Yes.
And if they're not adaptable, then that person might be great and might be capable, but may not be the person that you need if you need to run fast,
I feel like there's another kind of more of a cliche word, but it's so important, is initiative.
Yes.
Because some people are sitting there saying, well, Ashley, teach me everything, and basically put the knowledge in my brain so I can go and execute. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way.
No.
Versus someone that takes initiative, goes and learns, and comes in and asks specific questions and finds ways to get the information they need to wrap up, basically.
Yeah.
Huge.
And that's I think that's a big differentiator, at least on the generational side too, right? When you talk about Gen Z, millennials, Gen X. And I think what we're seeing now with Gen Z is, and I empathize with it to a degree, you've been in these structures, you've been in school, in college, where you're kind of taught, oh, here's the playbook, you execute on it, you get an A, you pass. And then you get into the work world, and that's not how it works. It's not you check a box and you do a good job and you get a raise. That's just not how it works. You have to manage your own career. And I think that some people are struggling with that transition. I know that I definitely struggled with it too when I had my first job. And maybe that only clicked for me when I got into tech, and there was just something about being in tech that was exciting and it motivated me. But that's a big shift. And I think the thing that I'm grappling with right now is, to what degree, as managers, do you set the standard and manage the team against what the standards are? Or is there a role that managers should play in, like, teaching Gen Z that this is just the way that work works? How much of it is taught versus how much of it is like, okay, you just have to experience it, and at some point you will learn that this is the way that it works.
Yes, I don't think we're giving our folks enough leadership and enough learnings. We had a case very recently where one of the directors, one of her employees asks for a cost of living a raise. And she comes to me, and this is a hardworking person that's asking for this raise, and she says, hey, this person's asking for a 3% cost of living raise. And I said, no, we don't do cost of living raises, we do performance raises. Has this person performed? And I know the answer is yes. So the person asked for a 3% cost of living raise, and we said no. We said no. Within a month, she got a 6% performance raise. So in that setting, we changed her brain cycle from, hey, I survived a year here, and you like me, I'd like a raise because life is getting more expensive. And yes, look, I understand life is getting more expensive, but it's like, to an employer, is like, no, like, we don't, that's not why we give raises. We give it because you're excelling, you're getting better, you're either getting promoted or you're staying in the exact role but getting better. And I think it was a shock to this person. Because they got no for a 3% raise and a yes for like a 6% raise and a bonus, and it was really cool. That person's never going to ask for a cost of living raise again.
No,
I'm guessing,
right? Exactly. You just change the dynamic completely. And you reminded me of a situation in my career where, even though I climbed the ladder pretty fast in tech, like the first year or so, that I went from an individual contributor to a manager, I actually had a manager who was the general manager. Wow, so many.
Interesting.
She sat me down and she told me, or she painted a vision for where she thought my career could go. And she told me I was on a director track. I hadn't thought about that for myself.
Nice.
And she also told me what the salary would be at that level. And it wasn't a like, oh, this is yours now kind of conversation. Yes. It wasn't a promotion one, but she told me where I could go if I continued to perform at the level that I did. And I ended up getting that director role.
Amazing.
And like the capacity was there in me, but I just didn't know, or I didn't see it for myself. And sometimes it does take like exactly what you did, where it's a no, but here is what you are capable of. And I love when I hear stories like that.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about General Assembly, because if I'm thinking correctly, this was a successful company that grew and exited, if I remember.
Yeah.
One of the things you did, I think you mentioned you scaled the financing arm to $1 million per quarter. Like, what did that teach you about working under pressure, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah. So that was so interesting, because again, there's a theme here at GA where I managed things that I had no experience in, and it was just a challenge for me to learn the thing. So we had someone who was brilliant who introduced the concept of financing to the company. Her name is Mercedes Bent, and she's an amazing venture capitalist right now. I think she's starting her own thing, but she brought financing into the company and kind of handed it over to me when we were at a point where it was ready to scale. And when I took it over, I kind of assessed what it was. I kind of did a deep dive on what financing was. And I realized that the way to scale was to train our sales team on how to infuse financing into the sales process.
Okay.
It's going to be the make or break for some people in terms of affordability. They can take a General Assembly program and pay out of pocket, or maybe they can't, but they can finance it. It's like we were ahead of the curve, I guess, with like the Klarnas of the world or what may have you, right? So I did that. I trained the sales team, and I worked with our financing partners, actually closed additional outdoor financing partners in order to continue to meet demand here. But it went from something that was pulling in maybe $200K a quarter for the company, which is still impressive, to being something that was pulling in $1 million a quarter, because I just really focused on scaling it, and I really focused on listening to student feedback and improving the programs. And I didn't stop there either. We were ready to innovate financing, and this was one of the last things I worked on at GA, where we introduced this concept of, and I think it's not really a thing anymore, but called ISAs, where you cannot pay anything up front, but then you start paying back the program once you've secured a job, which again opened it up to many more people.
Sure.
And I was in I was in the rooms with the CEO, COO, and CFO securing outside funding from like VCs or from private institutional investors or what may have you. And we actually closed a $75 million funding facility right before I left. And again, sorry about that.
She disagrees.
Yeah, again, disagrees. But again, it was one of those things where I saw the opportunity here, and I saw that I could potentially lead something really big for the company, and not just for the company, but have an incredible impact on people's lives who were looking to make a career change. And now this was accessible for them. And I was just driven by that. And yeah, I put a lot into it. I worked hard again to figure out how to make it work. But yeah.
General Assembly was one of the pioneers in this kind of space a few years ago. I remember it went from boot campers were ignored, like, oh, he's
Yes.
one of those boot camp graduates, no thanks, to
Yes.
there was enough traction
Yeah.
that people started saying yes. Because remember, we're
Yes.
right. Higher Cloud is a technology consulting and recruiting firm. So
Yes.
in the beginning, it was like, no, it must be a computer science degree
Yes.
from a
Yeah.
top university. And if it was a
Exactly.
General Assembly or one of those boot camps, it was like
Yeah.
like,
Nope.
oh,
Yeah.
no
Can't trust
thanks.
them.
And
Yep.
somehow along the way, with I'm sure just a great program, but also some traction along the way in creative marketing,
Yeah.
you saw more and more of these young folks get in the door,
Yeah.
prove themselves, and all of a sudden it was like, oh,
Yeah.
you know what? Maybe that we have something here. And so I saw a big shift.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you guys did a lot. You did a lot right.
We
Actually,
did.
you worked at General Assembly. They had a very nice exit, I believe, right? What
Yep.
was the exit? Is it public? Are you able to share it?
Yeah, it's public. So they were acquired by, oh my gosh, just had a complete brain fart. Adecco. There we go.
Adecco,
So
yes.
they were acquired by Adecco, and at the time when the acquisition was happening, it was interesting to think about what the strategic decision was there. But once it was announced and once we, had more time with the Adecco team, it was very clear why GA went in this direction. And really, it was having that strategic vision and seeing long term what GA could be. And Adecco, if listeners don't know, is a staffing firm. Let's just make it simple. And they place candidates. And what's interesting about General Assembly is that it was a boot camp or a skills building company. Sure. And you have to imagine that there may be companies that maybe instead of continuing to hire additional staff, they may want to skill up their existing staff and put them into new roles. Or maybe a department is no longer relevant within a company, but they have a team of really great people who are capable of learning this skill, and they can do it in 3 months instead of traditional, like if you were to think about a traditional recruitment process that can take a long time. Let's say if the company's doing it internally, 3 to 6 months. But you have these people who are great workers, who are interested in continuing to stay with the company. All right, what if we had something like a General Assembly that could reskill them and use this talent and continue to have them grow with the company? So that was the strategic, I think, alignment between Adecco and General Assembly, and the partnership is still there. And I think the company's still doing well. And I left in 2018, so it's been 7 years since I left. So they must be doing something right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, you've also worked at some good companies in leadership roles that didn't exit or scale at this level. Like, what were the key differences that you look at the execution, whether it's timing or it's just execution itself? Like, what was the key difference between a winning kind of exit strategy and one that's flailing a little bit?
Yeah. Oh my God. I wish more people would ask this question, to be honest. And I'll talk about the things that General Assembly did right. So I think General Assembly hired the right executives for the right time in the business. And that is so critical. Okay. And maybe one of the best hires that they ever made was the COO and president of the company. And I'm partial because he was my manager, but he taught me everything that I knew. And, amazing. I talked about the things that I did. It was really under his leadership after I moved out from under the general manager, who was also great. And I think what General Assembly was able to do really well was respond to shifts in market conditions. So there was a time when we had this UX boot camp, and the UX job market actually wasn't booming anymore. And it was one of our top 3 programs. And the team, instead of trying to like force this thing to grow and scale, they're like, okay, all right, this is a data point. What are we going to do next? Like, how can we continue expanding? Or do we increase our targets on the enterprise side of the business because there's room to grow there? But I think they were just really smart and very strategic about the plays that they were making based on what the market was telling them, which is hard. It sounds simple, but I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of companies do struggle. And then the other thing that was completely unique to GA, I have not experienced it anywhere else, was their ability to hire top talent across the board. When I started my coaching business and I was thinking about who I wanted to reconnect with from my career,
Yeah.
all of the catch-up chats that I had were people that I worked with at General Assembly, maybe 99% of them, because the team was just so solid. And there just has to be something about the executive teams or the leadership team's ability to hire and pinpoint the right type of talent.
Amazing. So the two things I heard that stood out is pivoting when it's needed by listening to the market, not just ignoring it, right? Like actually listening and saying, hey, this has lost popularity. People don't care about this so much. Let's pivot. So that's huge. And then two, right, hiring the right people, putting them in the right seats during the right time. That's huge. Often the conversation I hear is like, oh, we can't afford to hire now, or we can't afford to pay what it takes to get someone great, and the conversation is you can't afford not to, and that's something, again, easier said than done externally. That's the message for us externally, obviously, as a executive search consulting recruiting firm, but internally I recognize that too. When you hire the right people, you fly. Right?
Yes.
You don't have to convince them that they can do it, or you don't have to tell them to be creative, or, this is just in them. Problem solving is innate to them. The motivation, you're not trying to motivate the wrong people into doing the right things. They're motivated already. You just have to give them some direction, some leadership, and that's it. It's huge. Very, very important. When an organization starts losing traction, Ashley, what's the first place you look to course correct, whether it's in your coaching job or in your previous leadership roles?
Yeah. So when I think about that in my current coaching work, sometimes the answer is, or actually the first place that I look is the team. Who's in seat? And I guess this is a continuing theme from what we just talked about, but are the right people in the right seats? Are the right people being challenged in the ways that they need to be challenged? Is there untapped talent, I think? And then in terms of from a leadership perspective, is the strategy right? So what are you focused on and why? And is that the right plan for you at this moment? When I focus on like team and fit and things like that, and then whether the strategy is right, we start to see that the puzzle becomes untangled, for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a simple question. What are you focused on and why?
Yeah.
I think we could all use that, because sometimes we just do. We just go, right? It's like if you ever gone to the gym and just kind of just done whatever comes natural, whatever's open, at that time, you're like, why are you doing that? Why do you do cardio in the beginning and then weight lift? I don't know, because of this. Well, you should shift it, and a small shift could really make a difference, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's some of these simple questions that really do it.
Yeah.
So it's who's in the seats, are they the right people in the right seats, and then kind of seeing what they're focused on and why.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And how do you tell someone that they're not focused on the right thing?
I asked a lot of questions, and through asking questions, then the answer becomes a lot clearer to someone. So, for example, if we're talking through like a placement issue with someone on a team, and let's say someone on a team has been doing this job for a really long time, and they're good. They're a solid person that you want to keep in the company, but the way that they have been working actually isn't an area of growth at the company right now. And let's say the leader that I'm working with is actually focused on the fact that they can't afford this person anymore in their current role. Okay. Then it's, what opportunities exist outside of this department? What problems are you trying to solve in the company right now? It's like, oh my gosh, let's say this person's an operations person, and you look and you see the opportunities that exist at the company outside of their lane are actually operational problems to solve. That it's like,
Wow.
oh, okay, you have this person who's an expert and they can actually help you solve these problems. Let's say you focus or like you allocate their salary 50% here where they used to be and then 50% against this other operations department work. Your problem is solved. You don't have to let go of a great person, and you don't actually have to bring in someone new to solve this operational stuff because you have an expert right here.
Really smart.
Yeah.
I mean, potentially you just prevented a layoff. You prevented someone being stuck and unemployed, and then having to and kind of gamble with hiring someone new, which is frankly always a gamble, right?
It is a gamble, right? Yeah. It can work or it could not. And at the level that you work at, right, which is executive staffing, it can be a costly mistake.
Oh, yeah.
So, you're talking like 3x, 4x this person's salary in terms of impact.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, for the wrong hire.
Because people misunderstand. Like there's data out there. When we were doing some research, it was like, what's a bad hire cost? And it was like 15,000. No. When we went deeper, it was upwards of like 435,000 for an executive level person, which is 1 to 3 times their salary, which was very surprising. Yeah, it's huge. We're actually doing a webinar on it, so check it out when you get a chance.
Oh, I will. Send me the link. I would love to.
I'll send you an info. It's going to be great. I have some amazing business leaders and talent acquisition leaders from Meta and other great Cornerstone On Demand and great companies and Google and all that. Actually, for leaders who feel stuck while kind of performing at a high level, where do you begin to help to shift them?
Yeah, and I'm not going to minimize this, but a lot of times it is a values issue, and I will explain because that could sound very woo-woo, right, for tech leaders. So what this is really questioning what's important to you, because the things that you value change throughout your life. So for me, when I was at General Assembly, I was like late 20s, early 30s maybe, and going into that job, my values were being challenged by my role, learning, growing, and like, if I'm being honest, still being able to go out and party and like have fun in New York City, right?
Of course.
Those were my values. And after a certain point, so when I compare that to what my values were now, when I stepped into coaching, my values were about impact and my ability to impact others in their careers. My values were about time and flexibility and the ability to be able to control my schedule after maybe 15 years of not having very much control over my schedule and being like in that executive seat and go. And I was like, oh, well, I have a choice to make here. If I want to take a break from that, I can. And I can set up my career in the way that I want to as a coach. So when I start to have those conversations with my executive clients, and a lot of times it'll start as, this job isn't working for me, I don't like this, I don't like that, and they're coming into the conversations as maybe from a place of not being empowered or blaming external factors for where they are. Then we look inside and it's like, okay, what do you want? And it's not as simple as, do you want this job or not? It's more of a, what is important to you and where is this friction? And usually when we start unpacking things, like I've had clients that are like, oh, I live in the city and I want to be close to my family, and my family states away. So I feel this guilt in my day-to-day of not being as connected to my family. And it's like, okay, well, can you work from anywhere? Some people can, some people can't. If you can, great. Conversation with your leadership. If you can't, maybe that's a signal that you need to find something else closer to your family. But once we tap into that, it becomes so much easier to get unstuck, because what's driving you is these things that are important to you versus like what you think you should be doing or what someone has told you that your company should be doing for you. Like, all of those things are kind of fake. Not as in like you want to be fake, but they don't matter. What matters is what you want. Yeah,
absolutely. And actually, one of the things I talk a lot about on whether I'm keynote speaking or on my podcast is is finding alignment.
Yes.
Because it's not all just about skills, right?
Yes.
It's like, oh, she's great and
Yes.
this role is great and it pays enough. And
yes.
they both can do the skills. Like as a company, HireCloud
Yes.
is focused on finding alignment because
Yes.
there is a gap sometimes. And people will say what they want you to hear, but it's not really the truth.
No.
Right?
No.
I had sometimes we have ruthlessly honest conversations with candidates because they'll come to us and, hey, I want to work for HireCloud, and they kind of describe it, but something's off. And I'll poke at it politely. Doesn't, I'll ask again. And then I get to a point where I'm like, look, be honest. Are you just coming out of the cold because of that?
Yeah.
If so, I think it's short term because you should continue what you're doing here because it'll turn around versus coming in here temporarily. And they're like, you could see the look on their face. They're like, oh my God, he's inside my brain. All I'm doing is I'm saving you a year and us a year of kind of a waste, right?
Yeah.
Not because this person won't add value, not because it's temporary. I don't want to deal with like 1 year temporary. Everything's temporary, I guess, but there's a difference between an impactful 2-3 years and temporary and we're aligned and then things change versus
change how you do the work.
You're in a different kind of thing. Like you mentioned your manager had like sat down with you and said, hey, Ashley, here's where your career is headed, where I see. And imagine if you didn't agree.
Yeah.
And somehow you just said, and then this person built this amazing plan for you and really went to bat to put you in opportunities. And then a year later, she finds out that, no, Ashley's actually just looking for a really comfortable job that pays the most with the least amount of work because she wants to work remote. In a year, she's going to leave anyway. Yeah. You have a huge misalignment. And now it's not unfair. It's unfair to one of the two parties.
Totally. Yeah. Which is why I love the approach that she took, which was like she painted the vision and it was still up to me. As I walked out of that room, I had to show up, I had to perform, I had to like appear to be like going after the work in a certain way. And I think it would have been clear to her if after that moment I was kind of just like, oh, okay, I'm going to do the bare minimum or I'm going to be like good. But like, you know what that looks like when someone is really trying hard and when someone is just going for just enough, right?
Especially talented people, they can get away with just enough to get to the next step in their careers as a stepping stone. You want to know that as a manager, and maybe you're okay with it, and that's totally fine. It's just you're aligned on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I remember a time where one of our stars, we were forcing her into a leadership role. Yeah. And she was down to do it because she cared about the organization and she was a high achiever. But we put her in that role and she didn't do a great job. And she wasn't really interested in doing a great job. But was willing to do it. After a year of it, we said, look, you clearly want to be an individual contributor. You know there's a career path there. And she said, yeah, great. And she's thrived in a high-level IC role. And she's happy doing it. And we didn't have to force her to be in some leadership role she wasn't really into,
Yeah, exactly.
I've noticed when people are forced into something, the minute they're not good at it, they really don't want to problem solve out of it because it's not natural to them versus maybe I'm not great at being a manager, but I'll read a book. I'll go to a seminar. I'll listen to podcasts. I'll go to a course versus someone that's just like, I just don't like it. And I'm keep telling my manager, I don't like it. I don't like it. They keep forcing me into this stuff.
Yeah. There's such a difference. And I think it's a little bit more layered or nuanced than growth mindset, right? Because there's this like, you want to do it. And that's the difference. It may be easier for you to have a growth mindset when you are actually interested in the work. And maybe this person in this individual contributor role has a growth mindset now because they're in a role where they can fly versus being in a role where it was like, well, I don't really want to be a manager, right? Sure. It was kind of a slog for them.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk about diversity, but we
Yeah.
rarely talk about intergenerational diversity in
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
organizations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we in my small company, we have folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Oof,
No
yeah.
joke.
Yeah.
And some of them are in our headquarters office in LA where they
Yeah.
actually work together.
Yeah.
What are, what tensions? I mean, we're lucky enough where everyone does really well together. They
Yeah.
actually feed off of this
I love that.
amazing like
Yeah.
diversity. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
But in certain areas it could create tension because
Yeah.
they communicate differently.
Yeah.
They show up differently, they think differently, they work
Yeah.
differently. Like what, how do you help those teams understand each other and thrive together?
Yeah. So I wrote this down because I wanted to share. I thought this might come up, but I have 3 questions that I love to ask. Maybe not exactly in this way, but I have 3 questions. So when I think about intergenerational teams and how they work together, it comes down to these things. And the first question is, how do I navigate a conversation with someone whose motivations are different than mine? Right?
Okay.
So that's like,
Good.
okay, I'm motivated by this, but this person is motivated by that. How can I bridge the gap? The second question is, what do I do when their expectations don't match what I need or what I can realistically provide? So the second one is the big one. So I sometimes have clients who are like, oh my gosh, I'm working with someone who only wants to work 4 hours a day and they want to take a ton of breaks. Yeah, exactly. I saw your face. They want to take a ton of breaks during the day, and deadlines are squishy, and end of day means the next morning, right? And it's like, well, their expectations about what work looks like doesn't match what you need. And you're the manager here. And if they're not willing to provide it, then that's a conversation that you need to have with them. And this may not be a place for them. But sometimes I feel like people feel guilty about wanting to accommodate someone's ways of working when it just doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit the organizational needs.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then the third question is, how do I work with someone who brings a completely different context to the table? So for Gen Z, when you think about it, they are, such a digitally native generation, and they have been conditioned to always go, go, go. Actually, that's Gen Alpha, but some similarities there. And they've been given a lot of information. They have access to everything all the time, which is really different than my context. I'm a millennial, and I had different norms when I came up in the workplace. I actually had mentors in the workplace, which is harder. It's not as common now.
Yes.
And especially in a hybrid work environment or a remote work environment, that is so different than when I was 22. And the way that I learned in the office was I was there 5 days a week, and I kind of just absorbed what was going on around me. Yeah. And I was in meetings with executives, but I was also like sitting next to them. I could see how they prepared before they got into the meeting. It wasn't just that they showed up and delivered this amazing presentation and they were just like that. And so it's like all of these things that I was able to pick up on almost don't exist in this context. So really thinking about the context, and it goes all ways. We all kind of grew up in different work environments. So thinking about the context piece also gives you a little bit of color when you're thinking about working across teams. But those are the 3 that I always return back to.
That's really good. That's really good. And one thing you said about this, like the new world, which is actually now shifting to hybrid, but the new remote, like everyone wants to work remote. What I've found is that the most common person that wants to work remote is the exact person should not work remote. So it's your 24-year-old, 25-year-old who wants to work remote. And I'm like, wait a minute, you are the one that's losing the most from this. Because the senior person who's got 15 years of experience, although it's much healthier for them to be surrounded by colleagues, they can afford to just work from home and just execute.
Yes.
You're talking about you need to surround yourself around people and listen to them and
Yeah.
ask them quick questions. You can't do this on Slack. You're not
No.
observing them, their work style on Slack. So
Yeah.
I think there's a huge miss there
Yeah.
where people, young people want to work from home, and it's
Yeah.
understandable. Everybody wants to wake up in their pajamas and walk
Yeah.
around and have all this flexibility, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's healthy for them. So it's good that you
Yeah.
brought that up.
There's a lot of missed opportunities there. And again, I don't think that you're saying everyone must be in the office 5 days a week. There is a
Yes.
place for that, but
Yes.
there is value for being in an office or being together or whatever, but being in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The kind of also another thing that hit me is like we have to understand how young people think or older people think. Like for example, you ever done a thumbs up on a kind of a text message?
Yeah.
That in our world means, hey, good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Somebody here told me, it was Gen Zer, and said, that's really passive aggressive, and I laughed. And I was like, "What do you mean passive aggressive?
Yeah.
Like thumbs up means good?" He goes, "No, boss. In my world, that's like, okay, buddy, like you suck."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" So I go home and I tell my wife and kids this, and my daughter's laughing. She's like, "Dad, that's like super passive aggressive in what we talk about." And I'm like, "You think that way?" He goes, No, I don't think that way, but that's how people would react at school if I gave a thumbs up on a text message. I'm like, wow. So I started thinking about that in my communication to my younger staff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just do that.
Yeah.
So weird.
Yeah.
But it's those small, subtle things that we have to look
Exactly.
out for.
Exactly. And that's the context that they're bringing, right? And like you didn't mean you weren't being passive aggressive whatsoever, but someone's looking at it and they're like, oh no.
Yes. So then and it doesn't always have to be one way either. You can tell them, hey, when I give you a thumbs up, it just means good. I'm good with it. I'm approved. So it doesn't have to be we constantly shift.
No.
I think you also mentioned something earlier that I liked. You talked about sometimes we have the pressure as managers, bosses, owners, whatever, to give in to every ridiculous kind of expectation, or it doesn't have to be ridiculous. I shouldn't judge it, but it's like being a parent in a way where you want to be cool all the time. And there's a lot of pressure on companies to be flexible and give everything and give. And receiving is taboo. Like, how dare I expect my employees to work and be productive? It's really odd.
Yeah.
I think we need to take ownership as the adults in a room sometimes, as the leaders, and say, no, I'm not okay with this. And this won't work. I'm not judging you. Your style of communication doesn't work for my company.
Yes.
Period. You know?
Yeah.
That's, either we're going to do it this way. Unfortunately, we're going to help you out. We have to be okay with those tough conversations.
We have to be.
Because frankly, it's not just good for us. It's good for that person. Because that person could thrive somewhere else with that exact same mindset potentially.
Yeah.
Right? If they find the right organizations. I've had people come back and they want to work in our structured environment. I'm thinking, why did you take your last job since it was so flexible? Why do you now want structure?
Yeah.
And it's a young person saying, well, I used to be at a structured company. I did really well.
Yeah.
Then I went and fantasized about this like work wherever you are, whenever you are. And I thought this was going to be amazing. And it's led me to not do well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was really honest of them. And it only came out when I kept pushing, because I didn't believe this person would be happy here. I'm like, dude, you get to do whatever you want whenever you want. You're going to come in and someone's going to be on your ass to produce results. He's like, that's what I need.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
We'll see about that. But this is a very new story. So we'll see the results. I'll tell you about it when it turns out. Let's talk a little bit about career plateaus and burnouts and becoming kind of, undeniably promotable. I think you mentioned in the conversations. What are some subtle signs that someone's reached kind of a career threshold or plateau?
Yeah. So real signs for me are, and it can be as simple as, hey, I think I'm really great at my job. My performance reviews are good, meets expectations. And I think I'm ready for a promotion, but my manager keeps telling me no. So that's nothing bad. They're performing, But
Yep.
what that usually tells me is that they're at a plateau in their career and they're probably stuck in this phase of, oh, what worked for me before is going to get me to the next level, and it's not.
It's not.
So that's what we work on is like, okay, you are good. You're kind of on cruise control, but in order to get to the next level, you have to show up a little bit differently. And let's like, let me show you what that means for you. And for some people, it's kind of eye-opening because they're like, oh, but doing all of these things really well got me promoted to being a manager. Why can't I just do that again? Well, you want to be a director, and it's as simple as that, right?
Hmm. That's awesome. Well, how do you help people become indispensable executors?
Ooh, so there's two things. One, it's about the work, and the people that come to me are already capable of doing really great work. That's why they come
Hmm.
to me.
Hmm.
The other thing is that they're not promoting it. That's the second piece. And that's the thing
Ah,
that keeps them stuck is like, okay, well, you're doing this good work. Your manager knows they can give you anything and you'll execute on it. Your department is doing well. You're solid. But who else knows? So,
mm,
does your manager's manager know about this? Are you taking opportunities to present in front of the leadership team? Have you shared your ideas proactively? Like, there are some people that just want to put their heads down and focus on the work, but they don't realize there's a price to that. It's costing
sure.
them advancement in their career. And once they start to pull themselves out of the weeds or out of their cave of productivity, and they start to maybe share things in leadership team meetings, or they start having like little check ins with their manager's manager, or maybe they start sending an email quarterly, semi-annual email update, talking about the things that they've done or their teams have done. They start to see that the perception of them shifts in the organization. And instead of being is this person ready for leadership? It's, of course they are, right? So like,
Yeah.
it's no longer a question anymore because you started showing up as the person who is already at that level. So of course we would. Yeah.
Wow. In our quarterlies, there's a specific portion of it where the person, the employee, has an opportunity to brag about what they've accomplished.
I love that.
And often as a manager, I'm a manager of very few people, as you can imagine, because
Yep.
I have a director that runs most of it. But
Yep.
those few people, I'm like, I know them very well and I know how valuable they are, but there are surprises in there. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. Oh,
Yes.
that was
Yes.
you? Oh, I didn't
Yes.
really, and it's really helpful
It is.
because
It's
they might be
so
like, no one
helpful.
cares. They didn't even
Yeah.
care. I did. No, 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 I care. I just
Yeah.
forgot. Or I didn't know it was you. Thank you. I didn't know you were so proud of this.
Yes.
I should give you some love on that. That's awesome.
Yes. And
So,
the one, oh,
yeah.
sorry, but
No, 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 please.
the one thing that I'm able to help my clients with, and because I've been an executive and I've also been on the other side, is
Yep.
a lot of times it's not malice. A lot of times it's not that your company doesn't want to promote you. You also have to remember that executives are managing so much information at any given point in
Yep.
time. And it is very hard for someone to remember the win that you had 3 months ago, 6 months,
Yep.
last week, even, right? In the middle of managing everything else that it takes to run a company, to run a business. So the way that you stay top of mind is putting the information in front of them enough times that it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is that. This is what that person is capable of.
And so you're helping people become undeniably promotable
Yeah.
in a way, yeah,
Yeah.
because you're presenting the data.
Yeah.
What's one lesson you wish that you had given your younger self?
Whew, good question. One of the lessons that I would have told myself when I was younger, and maybe this ties back to the Gen Z conversation, is you have to show up at work as the person who you want to become. So if you want to continue to grow in your career, show up as the person who is worthy of that. You
Hmm.
don't show up and do the bare minimum, or only do the bare minimum of what's expected of you and expect great things to happen to you in your career. So I would definitely try to plant that seed a little bit earlier for myself. But that doesn't mean that I didn't get there. It took me 6 years before I got there, which
Wow.
isn't all that long, but it is long.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think about, oh, where would I be if I took my first job really seriously? Who knows? But I still ended up in a really great place, and I've accomplished a lot of great things. But I think like that's the biggest lesson
That's
was,
great advice.
yeah, show up as the
Now,
person that you want to be.
imagine, Ashley, the folks that we're talking about that need the mentorship,
Yeah.
having that 6-7 year person now guiding them,
Yeah.
because a lot of times these folks hang out together
Yes.
and they kind of vent and commiserate together,
Totally.
and it's
Yeah.
the blind leading the blind, and all they're
It
doing
is.
is hurting themselves. If you
Yes.
do a survey and say, who do you talk to at work, who do
Yeah.
you listen to,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, you listen to your most junior
Yeah.
underperforming colleagues, like how are you
Yeah.
going to get better? And so
Yeah.
they're surprised that they don't grow, instead of,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I get all my advice from Ashley, like she's done so
Yeah.
much, and she's, and it's, she's not a know-it-all. She just like, when I ask for advice, she gives me real advice, and sometimes I don't like it.
Yeah.
So that's huge. I
Yeah.
brought that back a little bit. What's your favorite book?
Ooh, my favorite book. And I thought about this one. It's a classic.
Hmm.
I love Good to Great by Jim Collins. And I love that book. Actually, I'll give you two. So Good to Great by Jim Collins. And I love it because that's really what kind of sparked my growth in tech.
Mhm.
I read that book and I was like, poof, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You can be great. Like, why shoot for good if you can be great? And that unlocked something for me. And I'll give you a tactical book, but it is so helpful. I love The First Minute, and I think the author is Chris Fenning, and it is all about communication. It's such a short read, but it essentially helps you unpack the fact that you have 1 minute with someone to land your point.
Yep.
And it's
You
great
lead
for
in with what you need, not
Yes.
So
Yes.
really funny. So Good to Great is a terrific book.
Yeah.
Many of us have read it. It's a classic, but it's
Yes.
really interesting that you took it as an individual. The book is supposed to be designed for businesses
Yes.
that want to go from good to great.
Yes.
But you took it
Yeah.
as an individual. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
I just did a live podcast in San Francisco from a brilliant guy named David Yang. And when I
Yeah.
asked him what book, you would
Yep.
think it'd be some AI book or something because he's an AI PhD.
Yeah.
He said Good to Great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's funny. And then another coincidence, The First Minute, terrific book. The
Yeah.
author was on my show.
Oh my gosh.
So you should check out that episode.
I should.
Isn't that funny? Because when you said
Yeah.
that, I'm like, I know that book. And then when you
Yep.
said Chris Fenning, I'm like, that's
Yep.
him. That's
Yep.
right on the show.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Because so much conversation is lost. Like I
So
see
much.
myself as a leader. When someone walks into the office and I'm listening and they have my attention, then I completely blank out and I feel guilty. But it's actually how they're interacting with me that's not
Yeah.
working.
Yes.
And I don't know what they're asking for. So like 5-10 minutes goes by. I'm like,
Yes.
what are you asking for? And
Yes.
it's like, oh, I just need this. I'm like, why don't you just lead with that? I didn't need this
Yes.
9-minute backstory to get to
Yes.
this
No.
silly little thing. This was an I am,
Yes.
So
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
Woo. This is
And I
great.
share that
Actually,
book
this-
with as many
yeah.
people as I can because
Such a simple
it's so
book. It's like
helpful.
this thin.
Yes.
He has other books too. I think like How to Lead a Meeting or something like that. So
Yeah.
that's a great advice. Ashley, where do people find you if they want to use your coaching service?
Yeah.
Or
So I make
connect with you.
it very easy. So my website is workwithashleyr.com.
Easy.
And
Easy.
the other place they could find me is on my newsletter. I publish a new newsletter every single Monday morning, and
Okay.
that is newsletter.workwithashleyr.com. So
Amazing.
very easy.
Amazing. Ashley, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot. Great insights.
All right. Thanks, Avetis. Thanks for having me
Thank
on.
you. Of course.
All right. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avetis Antaplyan, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.